Okay, so if we're trying to analyze all of these leads in the CRM, we want to get the grade, the quality, and the status, and we want this to stay up to date with whatever has happened recently in this contact's journey. Now, I'm going to explain to you why this is kind of a difficult problem to solve and how I've solved it. If you don't know me, my name's Adam. I've been building this business for too long, and yeah, I'm going to scale the living piss out of it. So anyways, I'm going to talk to you how I solve these technical problems of, basically to reiterate, we have to keep the status, summary, lead grade, sales grade up to date for this contact so that we can have accurate data when we're looking at all of our sales data. So let's get into it. I'm going to show you how we're pulling out contact activity right now. So basically what we do is we have phone calls. If there's a phone call that's like over 60 seconds, boom, let's go, let's reevaluate, let's check what's happened with this contact. You know, if there's something like a bunch of messages going back and forth without an evaluation, let's just catch that and reevaluate. But then we also need an evaluation in circumstances where it's a little more nuanced. You know, maybe we have an appointment that got booked and so we need to reevaluate there. Or maybe we had a couple messages but not that many. Should we evaluate? I don't know. Here's how we're solving this, all right? And I'm just going to show you how it works right now. So we have this task, which is going to basically go back and check the activity for every contact. And so what we're doing is if we have like a test location, so for testing, we're going to go back 7 days and see for anyone who has activity in the last 7 days. However, normally customers can set their own like delay, and then we go back a multiple, like one of their delays. So we have a time window, which is like, if their delay is 4 hours, then it'll go back 4 hours plus 4 hours. So it'll check in that 4-hour window. The actual window duration doesn't really make that much of a difference, but we want to catch people who have had activity. And so 7 days is a safe margin for that. So here's how it works. And actually, this is crazy. We can test this. If a test location, okay, that's funny. So we weren't actually checking with the test locations, but I'll show you how that works in a second. So what we're doing is normally we would go to our table for contacts and we would say, okay, from this table, give me all the people who are not a user, all right? If they're an internal user, we just skip them. And their last inbound message date is between the windows of most recent and oldest. And then also they either have never been evaluated before or their last evaluation is older than the most recent message. And then we also have this, which is kind of redundant because we also have a check for new contacts. So we're seeing, are there any new contacts created in this window that have at least one message, note, opportunity, task, or appointment? And so we're combining those and then we're triggering our evaluation. But I want to explain that this last inbound message is very strict, right? We're only looking for people where someone messaged back. But this might not be the case. You know, you might have a scenario where someone books an appointment. Well, in that case, you definitely want to reevaluate them, or you might want to. We'll see in a second how we solve that. And then we also might have scenarios where maybe a contact looks like they're really good, but then you're sending them messages and they've ghosted you. And so they don't send an inbound message, but they've ghosted you. So their status should change. They should go from like an A grade lead to like a D grade lead, or something along those lines, because they ghosted you, right? So now we have a materialized view, which gets basically all of the most recent activity and allows us to filter by that recent activity. So in this case, we're making sure that we have, you know, a last evaluation date and last activity date, and that last activity is within our target time window. And then we have a series of different conditions that we have to meet in order to get through our first phase of checks. Because basically the issue here is we can't reevaluate every single contact every single time we send a message, because that costs money, that costs AI credits. And so the goal here is, how can we get the most accurate, most up-to-date evaluation while not spending a shit ton of money on AI evaluations? So we have to solve that. So anyways, here's how we solve it. One of these conditions has to be true. So basically, for the most recent appointment created, was there an appointment created since we last evaluated them? Also, has there been an appointment finished since we last evaluated them? Has there been a message newer than an inbound message, basically the same criteria as last time, within the last time period. And then we also have the same thing for outbound messages, but for outbound messages, we're giving an additional interval of 1 day to make sure that we've waited a day since the last outbound message, because that's kind of how we're going to know someone has ghosted. And then we have things for notes, opportunities created, opportunities updated. And so once someone passes this kind of check, then they're going to go into our evaluate contact task. And so basically the important part of this task, this is where we do all of our analysis, on the contact. But then we also have this task here somewhere. This is a huge fucking task that we have. But we have a task that's going to basically determine if we should evaluate this contact. So this is our second kind of wall of defense against redundant, unnecessary evaluations. So what we're doing is, first of all, we had that basic check. We're just checking, do the dates, does it make sense to evaluate? Then we're going to check deterministically using all of the context we can about this contact without using AI, because it's way cheaper to do it this way. This just takes, a few milliseconds of compute, whereas AI takes several seconds of compute to get a response. And then we also have to see, and it also costs money, right? And so we're basically getting a list of all of the recent notes, messages, appointments, opportunities, and tasks that were either created or updated since our last evaluation. There we go. And so this is going to give us basically a comprehensive list of what's happened since the last evaluation. And we take that, and then I just had AI write this deterministic kind of formula to figure out if we should evaluate someone. So it takes into account notes. So do we have a lot of new characters that might have context about this contact? Do we have a bunch of new characters about, did they send a bunch of information over inbound? Did we send out a bunch of messages? Were there a bunch of phone calls, appointments, opportunities, tasks? And then what we do is we just take a threshold. So we have an arbitrary threshold, basically at this point, 0.7. If we're above that, we're going to just evaluate them. If we're below that, we're going to just skip them. And in between, so let me just show you. So if we're above the confidence to evaluate, then we're just going to go, yep, let's evaluate them. If we're below that, then we're going to say skip, and we don't need to use AI. However, if they're between 0.3 and 0.7, then we're going to use an AI-based check. And so what we're doing here is we're actually pulling out a bunch of data to feed to the AI so that it can determine whether or not we really need an evaluation. And so we have the last context. So basically we have a giant string which kind of breaks down like all the text messages, all the custom fields, appointments, opportunities, and we grab that, and then we grab the last result of the evaluation. So like, did we get an AI grade? Did we get an AI status, AI value, etc.? And then we're going to basically create a diff. So if you've ever used like GitHub or something, you've probably seen a diff like this. So we have, basically it shows you in green what has been added, in red what's been taken away, and this is basically a diff. And so we're going to feed a diff, if we have one like this, to the AI so that it can precisely see exactly what's changed since the last evaluation. And we're also going to tell it, okay, so you basically have to determine if we should reevaluate this, if it's worth it. And here's a diff of exactly what's changed. And then also, if we're scoring the contact, then we can tell it exactly what happened last time. So it knows, it can see the reasoning too. So if we say this contact got a D because, they said they weren't ready to move forward, and then the AI sees that they just texted, hey, I'm ready to move forward, then all of a sudden the AI is going to be like, yeah, let's reevaluate. This is way different. Something actually beneficial has changed. And then it can go ahead and basically respond with should evaluate false, basically, or should skip false. And it would basically tell us, yes, we're good to go ahead and evaluate. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a 3-phase evaluation system, because the old system was very kind of just strict, deterministic, kind of useless. And this one should be a lot more powerful and kind of keep things up to date, while also ideally keeping the cost down. I think this is going to be marginally more expensive, if that. If anything, it should just be kind of more efficient, especially with the middleware that we have now. So yeah, that is the new system. This is interesting.